no one financial plan can ever be the same. You've got to create your financial plan based on what you see to be a benefit to you and your family as you go into retirement. Welcome to the show. This is the Build Big, Live Bigger podcast. This is where you get real clarity about retirement so you can build a plan that blesses your life instead of becoming it. We'll share what you need to hear to replace worry with confidence, protect what you've built, and actually live your dreams, not your fears in retirement. Let's dive in. Welcome to episode 31 of the Build Big, Live Bigger podcast. My name is Jonathan Burgess, and I'm going to be your host for this episode, and I'm doing it solo today. Luke is actually down in an appointment, so we're rolling solo without him. So I actually wanted to talk today about some of the lessons that I learned this week and really reminders that came front of mind after I ran 3 appointments with 3 new clients, all of which were high net worth individuals, and took them through their particular plans. And I was, even though the asset amount was similar, they were totally different, all 3 of them. And so I wanted to talk about some of the principles that were the same, some of them that were different, and really just some takeaways that you could apply to your own retirement plan. And before we jump into today's episode, I do have to remind you this is not any specific recommendation to buy or sell a security. Please talk with your financial advisor, CPA, all your specific professionals. If you're going to make a financial decision, don't take any action based on this particular episode. I just want to give you some things that maybe you can bring up if you're a client of ours, that you could bring up with our advisors in a review, or if you're meeting with your CPA, some things that you could talk to them about. So 3 clients this week. One of the things that was constant between the 3 is all 3 of them had brokerage accounts from other institutions, and whenever they moved them here, they all had a similar question, which is, are you going to take all of my funds and sell them and allocate them to you guys' model portfolios? And that all really had to do with their own personal goals, first and foremost. Secondly, one of the things that you never want to do is say everything you got from your prior advisor was a terrible idea. Now, we have seen that where we've had to adopt a terrible idea and try to make lemons out of lemonade. However, there are some things that transition from one firm to another. They just may implement it differently. So all of these advisors had purchased various funds for their clients in these brokerage accounts. And what we focused on initially was the fundamentals of the funds were the fundamentals of the funds first. And then secondly, what are the fees that the clients are paying? What we did is we went through each individual brokerage account and we identified the positions that we call boat anchors. Everybody has some boat anchors in their portfolio, some things that really shouldn't be in there. And maybe they're in there because an advisor or broker was paid a commission to implement those things for you, or they were put in place by someone 10 years ago and they didn't have the information that's out there today. Now, a lot of these positions that we liquidated up front were things called mutual funds. And mutual funds typically have higher fees than index funds, and they're relatively easy to spot in a portfolio. All you have to do is go through and look and see if anything in your portfolio ends in an X. If it ends in an X, generally it's going to be a mutual fund. And if you were to go in and liquidate that, you could have significant fee savings compared to the benchmark index. Now, a benchmark index, if you don't know what that is the comparison to the mutual fund to see how it's performing. So let's say you have a stock-based mutual fund and it's going to follow blue chip stocks. Its comparison or benchmark index may be the S&P 500. So you could switch from that high cost mutual fund into an index fund like the S&P 500 or a different index fund and save significantly on fees. It also helps from a tax standpoint. So a lot of these folks had something on their portfolio called tax drag. And what tax drag is where a mutual fund is trading throughout the year and generating unnecessary taxes. So I'm going to walk you through one specific example. One new client had about $900,000 in funds that they were unaware that they were paying over $7,000 a year just in funds fees. And these funds were also generating another $10,000 a year in estimated taxes. So we went in, switched them from the mutual funds they were in, saved them $7,000 in funds fees, and then went to low-cost index funds that only generated about $1,000 a year in taxes. So significantly different result. And if you take that particular client, they saved about $16,000. Well, that's $16,000 per year back into their pocket, and that's compounding again. And that's equivalent of advisory fees, even if we were charging them the same thing. So imagine if you were, 20 or 30 years old and you were saving over $1,000 a month in your retirement account. Where would you be at today? Well, a lot of people think that numbers like that don't matter as much as you get older, but it definitely does. That's like if you're passing money down to the next generation, that's just like you saving over $1,000 a month into an account for them because they're going to inherit that money. Now, that one particular client had a legacy goal, so they wanted to leave money to their kids. The other client that we met with, they had a similar position, about $1 million in a brokerage account, but they did not have a legacy goal. In fact, this particular couple did not have any children, but they wanted to spend more in retirement. So one of the things that we did for them, they weren't taking a massive withdrawal rate out of their portfolio every year. They were only taking about 2%. Now, if you're new to retirement planning or you're right around the corner and you've never looked into this, the safe rate of withdrawal on any portfolio is about 4% per year. So if they were only taking 2, whenever you pass this additional $1,000 per month to them and cost savings, they were actually able to turn that into income for themselves in retirement.
If retirement clarity matters to you, don't wait. Text BOOK to 864-920-3155 or click the link in the description below to get a free copy of Jonathan's book, Retire Right.
They were able to take nearly an extra $1,000 a month and put that back into their pocket for income without going into too aggressive of a withdrawal rate. Therefore, they were able to increase their standard of living just by changing advisors, even if their performance didn't necessarily increase. So those are 2 examples. One is a legacy goal. The other one is an income goal. So those were both 2 of the takeaways that I had from this week. Now, the third client didn't necessarily have any any high-cost mutual funds, but what they did have is a lot of individual stocks that they were unaware of from a performance standpoint. So they knew, so I'm going to walk through what they owned, and you may actually be surprised that we recommended that they sell some of these. And you may not know some of these companies. If you don't, it's not a big deal. All of them are in the S&P 500, so in the top 500 stocks in the United States. And you may hear that and say, well, Jonathan, how do you know that they own too much of these particular companies? Well, in our case, what we do internally is we have an investment team that meets weekly, and we look and see what an advisor who has $220 billion in assets under management, what they buy for their clients. Now, what that does is that gives us all the confidence in the world as advisors to pull data from this other fiduciary retirement advisor that is much larger than us, that has $220 billion in assets under management and spends, I'm sure, in the neighborhood of $4 to $5 million a year on research. We're able to see what they buy for their clients, and in turn, we're able to see what percentage of their $220 billion they have in assets under management is allocated to each individual stock position. So for this particular client, we were able to go through, and in something that looked very, I don't want to say prudent, but it wouldn't catch the eye of anyone else. We always give advice from the point of view that we're pulling data from an advisor who has nearly a century in experience. And so, we were able to do this for him, and we trimmed $150,000 in stock positions and reallocated that money to areas like index funds that have a proven track record, and we don't have to worry about that individual security risk, therefore creating more safety and security for the client as they go through retirement. Now, I know I just talked a lot about topics, and you may be thinking, man, Jonathan, you just dropped a lot of information on me in a short amount of time. Well, our listeners range in investment knowledge, and so I want to give you a really simple thing that I took away from all 3 meetings, and that is no one financial plan can ever be the same. You've got to create your financial plan based on what you see to be a benefit to you and your family as you go into retirement. One couple that I met with, They actually, very high net worth individuals, they were paying their advisor $90,000 a year in fees and only taking $60,000 per year out of their portfolio, meaning their advisor was taking more out of their portfolio. Now, this is a very large account when I say $90,000 in fees, right? If you have $1 million, you're not paying $90,000 a year in fees. But this client was taking less money out than their advisor team was between product fees, advisor fees, and funds fees. And they were scared to death to take money out of their portfolio. They said, Jonathan, that's just how we grew up. And, it really made me think simplistically. I laughed and I joked whenever I told them this. But I said, why don't we just take half your money? And this was not my recommendation, but they didn't have any kids. Why don't we just take half your money and put it into annuities that pay you every single month, so you can make now this client was up there on the net worth spectrum, but they could make $300,000 a year from their annuities and let another $3.5 million grow in the S&P 500. And they just busted out laughing. And they were like, you know what? That might be one of the best plans we've heard. And it just goes to show that finance is a lot simpler than you think, but you can overcomplicate it extremely quick. And so you've always got to create a plan that is going to bless your life and not become your life. And how you do that is meeting with the right advisor, and they're able to see what your prior experiences are. How have you been burned in the past, if you've been burned? And how can we implement something not only that makes you feel safe and secure, but allows you to live a retirement worthy of the sacrifices you made to get here? Now, how we do that is through our blueprint process, which I'm not going to go through in depth right now, but it starts with you start with the end in mind. Like, what is it that we want out of retirement? If we look back and we're 90 and super wrinkly and can barely remember what we had for breakfast, how are we going to go back to lunchtime and say, okay, yeah, I do remember retirement. It was one that I enjoyed. I love living my life. And the first thing is you have to realize that money is a tool. That's all it is. It's just like having a garage slam full of tools. That's all money is. It can help you accomplish certain goals. Whenever you take a trip and you're going with your family, you don't stop at the gas station and get gas and be like, oh man, that was some really great gas that got us to, Florida. No, you talk about the memories and what it was that you accomplished on that trip. And so money's really the same way. And so, some people are all caught up in the returns and exactly how they need to, have everything set up to eke every dollar out. And that's really what an advisor's for, right? The right advisor, the right fiduciary advisor is going to do what's in your best interest. But at the end of the day, you have to say, am I getting everything that I need out of my money emotionally? And that's what I was reminded of in all three of these meetings, because they all looked completely different, even though the asset levels were similar. They were three different people, or three different couples with 6 different experiences of life and all kinds of different viewpoints. And so what you've got to do is take that information, disseminate it down, and say, look, it's all about whatever you're wanting to accomplish. So, if you're going into retirement and you're all concerned with stocks, bonds, index funds, mutual funds, annuities, real estate investment trusts, private equity, whatever it is that you're interested in, at the end of the day, it comes down to, can I create a plan that allows me to fully live in retirement without constantly checking my brokerage account, my 401k, and my IRA? And so a couple of the other tips that I gave to this couple, the one that really had trouble spending money, is to set up their distributions on biweekly schedules. So literally to have 2 different accounts, one paying them this week and one paying them 2 weeks from now, to make them feel like that's a paycheck. They have been earning their entire lives, saving their entire lives, and now it's to the point where they need to start taking income out of their portfolio. That's tough for some people, but you have to realize that your money's now working for you. You worked for your money. Now your money's going to work from you. If it makes you feel better, let it pay you every 2 weeks. And so that was one takeaway that I had with a couple. And then one of the last things that I want to loop in here in closing, and this is going to be a really short episode, but you know what? It's got a lot of good information that I want you to reflect on whatever time you thought this podcast was going to take. I want you to spend the rest of this time reflecting on what you want out of your retirement. But Whenever I sat with all three, they were all concerned about taxes. And that's why I said the thing about trimming positions. The right advisor will do something in a way that it doesn't create some massive tax bill. And so that's what we walk them through. Like, hey, we can make these decisions now, get you in a better position. And throughout the year, we'll continue to plan for taxes, because all throughout the year, there are things that are happening that allow us to capitalize from a tax standpoint. So again, this is probably the shortest episode of the Build Big, Live Bigger podcast, but I want you to take this time, think about what a dream retirement looks like for you and your family, and write it down. Are we making the right decisions to get us to where we need to go? Do we have the right advisor? The advisor that got you here may not get you there, and so you need to make sure that you have the right team around you, and really that you and your spouse, if you have a spouse and you're listening to this, are on the same page as it comes to retirement. So, look, let me be the reminder to pick up the phone and call your spouse right now and say, hey, what do we want retirement to look like? I hope you have a great day. This was episode 31 of the Build Big, Live Bigger podcast. If you enjoyed this, share this with a friend, and we will catch you on the next one.